who doesn't know Spider-Man? Even before the MCU turned Marvel into a cultural phenomenon, everyone knew Spidey. He has been the prime example of a superhero for decades. Especially thanks to Sam Raimi's trilogy, many know his story. But there's more to what meets the eye with this character. Do you know him well enough? Spider-Man debuted in comics in Amazing Fantasy number 15 in August 1962 after Marvel realized they needed a teenage hero for readers to relate to. This was more than 60 years ago. This comic featured different heroes, but the first story followed Peter Parker, a shy but brilliant 15-year-old living with his Uncle Ben and his Aunt May while going to Midtown High School. Peter had a normal life for a nerd living in the city. However, on a fateful day, everything changed. While attending a radioactivity experiment with an isotope genome accelerator at General Tektronix Laboratories East, Peter saw a spider get hit with a large dose of radiation. This small creature then jumped towards him and bit him. First, Peter only felt a bit lightheaded, but soon, very strange things started happening. When trying to take a small jump while dodging a car in the street, he actually took a huge leap. Then, he crushed a water pipe with his hands and managed to stick to a wall with his bare fingers. Using his genius-level intellect, Peter deduced that he had gotten superpowers. More specifically, he realized he now had the proportional strength, speed, and climbing abilities of a spider. He was absolutely right. Now Spider-Man has been one of the most beloved heroes ever for decades. But this was never Peter's plan. Once he got his abilities, Peter's mind didn't jump into becoming a superhero at all. Instead, he used these abilities to try and earn some money by becoming a wrestler. In fact, he created his whole Spider-Man persona as a character for the ring. Who would imagine he would become an incredibly beloved superhero? His affairs in the ring actually earned Peter great money, and even better, a lot of fame. He even appeared on television. After being pushed by everyone, constantly bullied at school, and basically invisible to the girls, Peter was finally living his dream. However, life was about to teach him a valuable lesson on humility. When leaving a studio after filming a TV show, Spider-Man noticed a thief escaping and chose to ignore it. He was still high on the thrill of fame. When the guard called him out on it, Spider-Man barked back, telling him that he wasn't anyone's helper. You see how all those years of resentment after being bullied hurt him? This decision felt like a small thing at the moment. However, a couple of days later, Peter learned that a criminal had killed his Uncle Ben. Thirsty for revenge, Spidey haunted the killer, only to learn it was the same thief he had let go outside the studio before. You see where this is going? If Spider-Man hadn't been so arrogant and used his powers to stop the thief at the time, his Uncle Ben wouldn't have died. This was the moment Peter discovered that with great power comes great responsibility. We'll tell you a bit more about that quote in a while. Now, you should know that this was Spider-Man's most basic origin story. However, it's been 60 years since his debut. This has changed a bit. It has kept the essentials. However, many writers have added to Spider-Man and Peter's lore. For example, now we know Peter's parents were Richard and Mary Parker, two CIA agents killed by Red Skull. This information makes Peter's becoming a hero into a more fate-related event. We also know that following his uncle's death, he had to find a way to make money. This led him to try and join the Fantastic Four. However, he soon learned they didn't pay anything. He would eventually join them for a while, but at the time, Peter was quite disappointed to know that being a hero was an unrewarded job. His constant debt also pushed Spidey to lean into his TV career. However, J. Jonah Jameson and the Daily Bugle started a smear campaign against him, so he had to abandon this path. Funnily enough, it was the Daily Bugle that helped him in the end. When fighting against the Vulture, Peter realized he had access to something no one else had, pictures of Spider-Man. This is how he paid bills for a while. How ironic, right? We have told you that Peter basically got the same abilities as a spider, but in a proportional size. Of course, this means he has superhuman traits, like super strength. Spider-Man may not be a super muscular guy like Wolverine or Thor, but he can lift up to 10 tons. Sure, he can't lift up a building, but he can handle a truck easily. Additionally, Spidey is super fast. He can outrun any Olympic runner and even go against an accelerating car. Funnily enough, Spider-Man chooses to swing around with his webs. This is his most iconic move. Since he's incredibly fast, Spider-Man is also very agile. His body coordination and balance are completely enhanced, so he can pull all kinds of dangerous stunts when fighting without any problem. In fact, he's known for swinging on his web and doing all kinds of flips and backflips during combat. Of course, this isn't just thanks to his super agility, but his muscles and tendons are more resilient and far more elastic than the average human. Otherwise, he would pull his muscles all the time. Together with his agility comes Spider-Man's amazing reflexes. It is said that Spidey's reflexes are 40 times better than the average Joe's. He's so fast, dodging a punch is easy peasy for him. Bullets are a bit harder, but he still manages very well. Peter Parker also has superhuman stamina and durability. This means he can fight for hours before fatigue sets in, and he can sustain punches that would simply kill a regular person. He has taken hits from some of the strongest Marvel characters, like Colossus, and he was fine to keep fighting after. Keep in mind, this X-Men is made of metal. All these skills allow Spider-Man to excel in battle, But even when they aren't enough for him to dodge a hit, his body will protect him. He doesn't have a healing factor as powerful as Wolverine does, but he still regenerates at a fast pace. He has healed broken bones in just a night. He has gotten third-degree burns that have healed in less than a week, and Peter even stopped using glasses once he was bitten by the spider. Additionally, he's immune to pretty much any external substance on his body. Since he has an incredibly fast metabolism, Spider-Man can handle any poison, illness, or drug without having to withstand its effects. His body will put it out even before he can process what happened. Another important spider-like ability that Peter got after the bite is his wall crawling. Just like an arachnid, this hero can crawl on walls and ceilings without falling. This is explained through physics. Spidey can control the electrostatic force between molecular boundary layers. This means he can basically trick his own atoms into gluing themselves to the wall. This is how he defies gravity. Finally, Spider-Man's most distinctive ability is his spider sense. This is basically his ability to recognize when something wicked comes his way, even before it's close to him. According to Peter himself, he feels a tingling sensation on his nape. This super instinct allows him to evade danger on a daily basis. The most interesting thing about Spider-Man's spider sense is that nobody seems to know how it works. Even Iron Man admitted he had no idea. Although some believe it's a very small version of precognition, nobody really knows for sure. You should know, though, that the spider sense is actually fallible, especially when villains use technology to disrupt it. This is Peter Parker's biggest weakness, alongside ethyl chloride. Basically, he's incredibly sensitive to pest control chemicals. It's only fair that he got the good and the bad parts of being an arachnid. When Peter Parker first became Spider-Man, he leaned into the bug aesthetic completely and created a pair of web shooters for his forearms so he could shoot webs like spiders do. Spider-Man's webs are possibly the most iconic part of his character, from swinging around New York City to using them to incapacitate foes. After being enhanced by the Spider-Queen in Spectacular Spider-Man Volume 2, number 15 to 20, this changes. Following this event, Spider-Man had the ability to shoot organic webs from his wrists. This was a direct reference to Sam Raimi's films. Spider-Man didn't have his own webs before the 2000 movies. Basically, as all spiders do, he could produce his own silk. He has since lost it, returning to his origins. Now, Peter uses his iconic artificial web shooters again. This brings us to the last of his powers, his amazing brain. We have told you that Peter created his own web shooters, but this is far from the only thing he's built. You remember we told you he was an absolute nerd, right? Well, this is because Peter Parker is a genius. The films don't really delve into this. He's kind of a nerd in Raimi's trilogy and in the MCU. However, he isn't the genius-level intellect that he is in the comics. Peter is truly smart. In fact, some of the smartest men in the world, like Hank Pym and Reed Richards, recognize him as an equal. Among the many things he has invented, there's his own web formula, his spider tracers, which allow him to track individuals, and his utility belt, full of different gadgets. He hacked into Tony Stark's iron spider armor too. With Peter now on his own due to everyone's memory of him being erased, the MCU could lean into this side of Peter more in the MCU's future, having Peter follow even more in Tony Stark's footsteps. In the end, even without all his super abilities, his brains make Peter an above-average human. Who knows what he would be if he weren't a superhero? We told you that Spider-Man learned that with great power comes great responsibility after the death of his uncle, and you probably already know that this is Peter's life philosophy. Everything he does, everything he is as a superhero, revolves around his sense of responsibility. In the Sam Raimi trilogy, this wise quote was coined by Uncle Ben. After Peter started changing, his uncle was worried he would lose himself, so he tried to have a heart-to-heart with the impatient teenager. At the moment, Peter didn't really pay attention to this amazing line, but it would eventually shape his character. But did you know that this powerful quote didn't come from Uncle Ben in the comics originally? Thanks to the 2002 Spider-Man movie, this quote is always attributed to Uncle Ben. However, when this quote appeared in comics, it was actually used by the anonymous narrator telling Spider-Man's story. Following its appearance in Amazing Fantasy number 15 in 1962, this quote didn't make it into a Spider-Man comic until 1986 in Spider-Man vs. Wolverine number 1, November 1986, 25 years after it was first used. This time, Peter uses it, explaining that this was an Uncle Ben saying. However, again, Uncle Ben didn't speak these words on page. It was Spider-Man as he reminisced about his uncle's words. The first time Uncle Ben actually appears in comics using the quote happened in February 2002 during Amazing Spider-Man Volume 2, number 38, February 2002. This was only a couple of months before the premiere of the film. Of course, since the movie reached further than the comics, now everyone thinks Uncle Ben actually used the quote in the 60s. It's interesting to think that a quote as iconic as this one has such a blurry origin. Even stranger Uncle Ben admitted during 2016's Amazing Spider-Man in Silk, the Spider-Fly Effect Infinite Comic number 4, that he didn't coin it. It was his father who used it first. This means Spider-Man's grandpa was the one to say, "With great power comes great responsibility" first. From then on, his descendants took it as a family motto. And then Spider-Man himself turned it into his life philosophy. You don't need to be a hardcore Spider-Man fan to know that his most shameful moment as a superhero was the night he was incapable of saving Gwen Stacy. In an attempt to hurt Spider-Man, the Green Goblin kidnapped Gwen Stacy, Peter's friend and potential love interest. The villain then threw her from the Brooklyn Bridge, and when Spidey tried to save her using one of his webs, her neck broke due to the whiplash. This night completely changed Peter's ideas about his own superpowers. Even Captain America and Iron Man fought about it, and Spider-Man's practically killing Gwen became a core argument for Iron Man's registration. Tony considered that new heroes needed to register so they could be properly trained. This would avoid another tragedy like Gwen's in the future. Ouch! Gwen's death altered the course of Peter Parker's life forever. For example, since Mary Jane and Gwen were great friends, Peter and MJ became closer while mourning, which eventually led them to a relationship. It's a bit strange to think that this power couple could have never existed if it wasn't for Gwen's death. But even Peter believes this. Peter has stated that if Gwen had survived, he would have never ended up with Mary Jane. In fact, this idea scares him, since it cheapens his fateful connection with his wife. Mary Jane doesn't have this problem. In fact, she thinks her romance with Peter is a predestined event, so it would have happened anyway. Still, knowing that Peter doubts his own love story with MJ due to the intricate twists and turns of fate, it's a lot for those who love this couple. Despite her influential death, Gwen Stacy has experienced a rebirth of sorts in Marvel media. Spider-Gwen is a popular take on the Spider-Man journey, with Peter Parker dying instead of Gwen. The Spider-Verse movie series also highlights Gwen and her relationship with Miles Morales, bringing her character to a new generation. Of course, Gwen Stacy's role in Peter Parker's story is also further complicated by Gwen's recent return in Gwenpool #1, 2025, to the main MCU universe. As X-31, her current plans are still unfolding, but connecting her with the Weapon X program and with Wolverine's power set could lead to interesting developments in the future and further adventures with Spider-Man. Have you heard about SpiderMan Reign? This comic, created by Carr Andrews, is without a doubt one of the darkest passages of Spider-Man's story in the Marvel Universe. Let us tell you why. It's 30 years later, and Peter Parker is now a cynical old man who hasn't done any heroics in forever. He works as a florist, living in a dystopic New York City controlled by the rain, and he lives a lonely life, mourning the death of Mary Jane, his wife, who passed away due to cancer. J. Jonah Jameson actually gives Peter his old suit back, trying to push him into becoming a beacon of hope for their decadent society. And he actually manages it. Peter overcomes his own issues, his own emotional pain, and finds a way to reignite the resistance in this destroyed New York City. Although a very tragic read, the comic ends on a somewhat hopeful note, reminding the reader that Spider-Man is a symbol of hope too. Of course, its ending isn't the reason why this is such a controversial story. It's something much darker than this. Spider-Man Reign implies that Peter Parker made Mary Jane sick. Peter mourns losing MJ, but not just because he lost her, but because he basically killed her. How? Well, according to this series, his sperm was radioactive, so Mary Jane basically got a constant influx of this poisonous energy during their marriage, which ended with her getting cancer. This is a very sick but realistic take. After all, since a radioactive spider bit Peter, it makes sense for him to be radioactive too. This would definitely make him a danger to his loved ones. Still, Spider-Man Reign feels incredibly off. Not only is the radioactive sperm a very sick idea, but the old bitter Peter Parker shatters the idea of what everyone expects from their neighborhood-friendly Spider-Man. Instead of acting as the childish, hopeful hero everyone loves, this old Peter is truly done with life, and he even has suicidal ideations. If this wasn't enough, Spider-Man Reign has a controversial nude panel in which the old Peter Parker sits on his bed, his private parts exposed as he covers his face with his hands. This panel was actually recalled, but many of us still remember how controversial it was, especially because many fans considered it very unnecessary. In the end, it was a matter of keeping the decadent style of the story, but since Spider-Man is such a wholesome hero, this clash was too much for readers to handle. Although this comic isn't canon, Spider-Man Reign is one of the weirdest moments in Spidey's history. It's such a different take on Spider-Man that some fans would love to keep it a secret from new readers. The MCU will likely not be adapting this particular storyline anytime soon, but who knows what the future could hold. Did you know about Spider-Man Reign? Would you like to see this series in an adaptation, or do you agree that it should stay hidden from new fans? Let us know in the comments what you think about it, and remember to subscribe. Until next time, thanks for watching CBR.